All right, next question. How to make the conversation just a little bit better than the average guy, especially when gaming out of state. Now this is interesting. This is, again, obviously someone who's followed a lot of my material, which I appreciate. And a lot of times what I say is I don't try and be amazing. I don't try and be like, shooting like lightning bolts out of my fingertips or making a girl give like massive indicators of interest or be like jumping on my dick in the first 5 minutes. What I do try and do is just have a normal conversation and be 10%, 15% better than the average guy. And that's enough to keep her there. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean much. What it means essentially is things like making statements rather than asking questions. Bring your own party rather than trying to get into hers. It means leading the interaction. It means assuming the burden of the conversation in the first few minutes and taking the pressure off of her shoulders. A lot of times the reason girls won't talk to guys is that, not that they don't want to talk to them, but they don't know what to say. The same as you don't know what to say talking to her, she has the same feeling with you, except multiply it by 10 because she didn't plan on being in this interaction, and also she's worried about feeling slutty and worried far more about her social value, those sorts of things. So all that plays in. A couple interesting quick things you can do. One is anytime you want to ask a boring get to know you question, change it into a statement. So for example, instead of saying where are you from, you don't seem like you're from California. You don't seem like you're from New York. You seem like a Southern girl. You seem like a Canadian. You seem very British, whatever, that sort of thing. Because what does that do? It makes it more interesting, right? Instead of it being this sort of like boring question she's heard a million times, it's something different, first of all. It's something that reflects on her. So she's gonna wonder, what does that mean? What does it mean when you say, I seem like I'm from New York? What's your perception of a New Yorker? Why do you think I'm that? Is it a positive thing or a negative thing? It makes it more intriguing for her. So that's one big one you can do, is just do that. Secondly, if you are gonna ask those questions, then have an interesting observation about them, right? If you do say, are you from XYZ? And she has to be like, oh, that's interesting. I've always felt blah, 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 blah. I've always thought this, right? Don't just ask and ask and ask and just be boring and plow ahead with more and more questions. Actually give feedback on the questions, right? Use the questions as catalysts for feedback, right? The big thing here again is the idea of offering value. The idea that you are bringing to the table something of yourself that's unique and different that she hasn't heard before, all right? You're not just being the next random guy. You're not just being in that same category. Assume the burden, all right? Other things you can do if you want, this is more of a applied out of field kind of thing, or more of a conscientious effort in life, is the idea when I first heard it was called adding wrinkles to the conversation. And what that means is saying things in a slightly more interesting way, saying things in a better way because you've thought about them, because you have opinions, etc. Basically the way that I learned this myself was I would watch stand-up comedians and I would break down their jokes and sort of have an idea of what the joke structures are. Or when I was in high school and college, I kept a book of quotations. And anytime there was a quote that I really liked that I thought was like brilliant or interesting or reusable or whatever, I'd write it down. I'd occasionally read through it, and then I would use those various things, okay? Last little tidbit I can give you is get specific. If you want to make your conversation more interesting, get specific. If I say I was eating a hamburger, that's boring. If I say I was eating like the most delicious quarter pound of beef ever imagined, just dripping with grease running down my chin, that is more interesting than a hamburger. That makes sense? So just by adding, I still said I'm eating a hamburger, but by giving details about the hamburger, it made it more interesting. Or if I said there's this really hot girl, or if I said there was this girl who's like, it was like her ass was just like barely constrained by these shorts and you just wanted to grab the thing. You know what I mean? If you say that, now all of a sudden it's more compelling than just saying some hot girl. All right, so get details, get specific. That's gonna make your conversation a bit more interesting, all right? Also realize that one of the biggest things you can do to make your conversation more interesting is you can still have that normal conversation, but if you have the emotional spikes, which are what we call game, then that will inherently make it more interesting, even if the baseline conversation is boring, okay? And lastly, I wanna throw in, because talking about technical details of conversation can put you in your head, one of the best things you can do to make your conversation more interesting and make it a little better is to care less about the outcome and have a better vibe, which is gonna come from not judging your conversation and not criticizing what comes out of your mouth. I know that's a little zen, like don't care if it's good, at the same time, here's how to make it good. But do both, right? Do the technique to make it good, and then don't care if the technique works. Do it without an outcome in mind. That's really sort of like the zen of all of game, is to do the right thing, but to do it without caring if it's right. Right? That's where it all comes together and becomes brilliant. Next question. How to make a girl respond to text if she's not responding to your first message? And then he says, mine is, what are you doing tonight? Now, when I first read this question, I found it, I think it's ambiguous, because first I read this and I thought that when you're not getting a response to the first message, what you're sending is, what are you doing tonight? And that's absolutely terrible. That's the opposite of what you should be sending in that case. Obviously, if you're not getting a response, that means you don't have a lot of social capital. She's not very bought into the interaction. She's not very emotionally invested in you. And so then you're asking for a lot and giving nothing. That's almost always going to result in a negative. So if that's the case, stop doing that. That's fucking terrible text game. What I think you're actually saying is that your first text is, what are you doing tonight, when you've just met the girl? Like, that's the first thing you send. And then you're not getting a response to that. You're wondering what to send afterwards, okay? Well, first of all, if that's the first text you're sending, that's a problem. You should be sending a text probably right when you get her number, to get your number in her phone, or to have some sort of banter back and forth, because that's going to make the number much more solid. If the first thing she's getting from you is, what are you doing tonight? Again, you're asking for a lot, giving very little. And it's also, you're catching her later at a moment when she's not thinking of you, right? It's not like that moment when you're in the interaction or you've just left and she's still very like warm on it and she's still very like excited about talking to you, right? So your timing's not very good either. So you're doing a lot of things kind of off there. But assuming you've done your homework, you send that first text and you're just saying this is the first text after that interaction. Then you send, what are you doing tonight? You get no answer. Okay, now she's telling you that you don't have enough compliance for that text. So what you need to do is send a text that requires less compliance, okay? So you need to offer more value, ask for less. Ping value into the void. So the message for this would be something along the lines of a Facebook update, a Twitter update, etc. Something like that, where if she doesn't respond to it, it's not a big deal. If you send out, funniest thing happened to me, blah, 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 and then that's it. And you don't tail it off with, what are you doing today, or let's get together, or something like that. You just say, this funny thing happened to me. Just plowing value into the world. If they don't like it, if they don't respond to it, that's fine. You send another thing in like a couple weeks that's sending more value. No one can get mad at you for saying cute, cool, fun, funny things at them and just sharing cool life experiences. And if they do, well, they'll ask you to stop texting them, and it happens every now and again. But you'll find, interestingly enough, if your texts are cool and interesting enough, like you can even like mass text like 50 girls, you'll get nobody saying, please don't text me. If your text sucks, if it's like boring or try hard or asking for too much, you'll get tons of them saying, please don't text me again, right? This is a good metric, right? So the text should be low investment enough that she can enjoy it, she can respond if she wants to, but if she doesn't respond, the interaction is not dead. You can keep trying and trying and trying again. So it's very low risk on your part. Okay, another text game question. This one is obviously someone who's read a lot of my theory, which I really like. I appreciate that. He says, how do you go from the soft close to the hard close in text game? This is dicey. This is definitely dicey. So by the way, for those of you who don't know, the soft close is like you have this idea of maybe we should get together for a drink sometime, and the hard close is setting down like Tuesday, 7 o'clock, etc. Okay? Well, you have to realize in these cases, if they're going for the soft close, usually they're potentially down for the hard close, but that doesn't mean they're motivated to have it happen, okay? So they've agreed tentatively to maybe get together with you. They're willing to get together with you, but they're not going to do work to make it happen. They're not going to inconvenience themselves in other ways to make it happen, all right? So first realize that people have busy schedules. They're not necessarily going to bend over backwards and make everything work for you. But then also realize that you can accommodate that, and realize that as you're being persistent, you need to keep it fun, you need to keep it light. So don't just be like, let's make plans, let's make plans, let's make plans. Keep having some value offering in there, keep having some fun along the way, as opposed to just going directly for the plans. And if you get the vibe that she really does want to make plans with you, but she just is really busy, oftentimes instead of suggesting specific plans, instead of saying, let's do Tuesday, let's do Thursday, I'll just open it up and be like, what does your week look like? Right? And just open it up and do that. Now, it's a little more needy that way, but you can always recover that later. And a lot of times what you're dealing with is not a lack of value, or not that she doesn't want to do it, but you're dealing with a lack of convenience. You're just dealing with a schedule issue, all right? So don't worry about losing that tiny little bit of value. Worry about getting the girl out, and trust that when you see her in person, you can rebuild that value. So be willing to be a bit flexible. And even if necessary, in some rare cases where you just can't get them out, be willing to go to them, or be willing to do a quick little thing just to like get that second interaction. And that way you can build enough value in the second interaction that after that, the next one will be easy, because they will have that emotional investment and will want to see and be willing to work for it, okay? Lastly, also, if you're just doing text game and you're not getting them out, one really useful text to do is to say, are you free to chat in a bit? And then actually get them on the phone, see what you can do from there. And also, if you're trying to, this is one other little side note on the hard close, or soft close to hard close. If you're trying to make plans and then they go silent in the making plans process, a lot of times what's happening is they're a little nervous about the situation. They're still down, but they're just a little nervous. And so they look at it like, I don't know how to respond to this. and then they like just say, oh, I'll get to it later, put it in their pocket, and sometimes they forget about it, or sometimes they don't get around to it because it's high pressure. A lot of times I'll send something like ... question mark, or question mark, something like that, and I find that in those contexts where it was definitely appropriate for them to give a response and they didn't, calling them out on it, you would think it's needy, but it's actually very entitled. Right? What would you do with your friends? If your friend wasn't responding, you'd send him ... question mark. You'd be like, what the fuck, man? Something like that, right? And you shouldn't send what the fuck, man to a girl because it's reactive, but ... question mark is still pretty good, or question mark. And so what you're doing is you're calling out, you're saying like, what happened? No answer, right? That's what an entitled man would do. That's what someone who believes he deserves an answer and believes his time is valuable would do. By not pursuing that, by like going like the weak route, or like following up later and trying to start all over again with new plans, you're basically saying, I don't believe I'm important, I don't believe I'm at your level, and I don't believe my time is valuable. And there is no way to make a girl like you, like stop liking you any quicker than that, all right? You have to be entitled, you have to show value, you have to respect your own time as well. Next question. I'm asked, I'm in state when I meet the girl, and so I do really well, I'm at my best, and then I'm out of state on the day 2. Or similarly, perhaps I meet her in a social circle setting when I'm out with my friends having a good time. Again, I'm kind of in the flow, things are going well. And then when I get her out on a day 2, I am out of state and things don't go as well, etc. Okay? It's very interesting. The first thing I would tell you is to work on learning to game out of state, work on just having your baseline be pretty okay, and especially work on not judging yourself when you're out of state. Most of the time when guys have a problem with being out of state, it's not even the state per se that's the problem, it's the fact that they're judging it, they're in their head, they're thinking they have to do a lot to impress the girl, as opposed to realizing that if the girl came on a date with you, she already likes you, she already wants to impress you, etc., right? So, and I mean, in theory, you need to learn to game out of state in a way, because say you have a girlfriend, you want to have to like wake up and get yourself in state in order to talk to your girlfriend in the morning? That's a little weird, right? You don't want that on an ongoing basis. You need to learn to make your base state good enough. So state per se is not the issue or it shouldn't be the only issue here. You should be working on your overall game and your overall idea of deserving it, regardless of being super on, being whatever. The key to state, honestly, is not judging and being in the moment. If you're in the moment and not judging, you're never going to be like a toxic vibe. You always be a positive vibe. You always be adding to the situation. So that's number one thing, is don't make state an excuse. Don't think you need state. Learn to game out of state. It's very, very, very useful if you want to have relationships as opposed to just random one night stands and random like flukish sort of, it happened when I was on situations. But that said, if you really do want to get yourself in state for a date, which I don't think is necessarily like the worst thing in the world, couple ideas. One would be go to your date a little early, especially if it's in a public place, and go talk to a couple girls outside before you go on your date. Just go get social. And you don't have to go pick them up necessarily, but just go get social, go get talkative, go get in that state. Don't even talk to guys. Just go get social, especially if you're coming like, you know, straight from a long day of work and you're really like frustrated and like frazzled. In a very logical frame of mind, sure, go do that. Or an easier, more viable one maybe is when you get to the date or on the way to the date, the drive while you're getting ready, call up some girls that you have a good vibe with, that you have a good chemistry with, and just talk to them and get in that flow that way. In fact, another good way is just use that as your phone time. Use your pre-date time as phone time and set up other dates even while getting ready for that date. That's going to do a couple things. It's going to get you in the flow. It's going to get you in the flow actually of flirting and being a bit of a closer too, as opposed to just being talkative, so it's even better. And then on top of that, you're likely to go into the date with a few other dates scheduled, which is going to make you far more abundant and less needy on the date itself, which again will probably enhance your overall experience too.